Future sea levels will rise dramatically due to global warming, wiping away coastal cities all over the planet. Governments employ licensing pregnancy to combat overpopulation since millions of people have been displaced and the current insane environment is causing a global famine. In order to make up for this, scientists develop a class of robots called mecha that don't need as many resources to survive as do humans. Professor Hobby, the creator of these mechas, disassembles a female mecha while explaining how robots are designed to react to injury or pain and to remember to avoid the source of the injury like a person would. A mechanical child that has been trained to adore its parents is Hobby's next step, but sadly this doesn't imitate human feeling. Couples who wish to have children yet are unable to do so will be targeted by the marketing of this device. Henry and his wife Monica see their son Martin in the hospital 20 months after the presentation. Martin was given a rare illness diagnosis and placed in suspended animation until a treatment is discovered. Martin's doctor is concerned about Monica, who frequently visits Martin's son to read to him and still holds out hope for that cure. He recommends Henry to assist Monica in processing the sadness she is now repressing. Henry submits an application for Cybertronics beta testing program in the hopes that this will let his wife to move on. Hobby selects Henry to test his most recent creation, a kid mecha named David. This robot is a mecha kid prototype that has been designed to feel love. Henry is challenged by Monica, who objects to the notion and claims that Martin hasn't yet passed away and that Henry is trying to replace him. But soon, Monica comes to the realization that she needs to take care of a kid once more, even if it's a mecha, in order to fill a void in her heart. Henry discusses the principles of the imprinting process after eventually convincing Monica to reconsider. When they decide to retain David, they have the option of activating his imprinting, which would make David obedient to them like a typical child who adores his parents. Since the imprinting is permanent, David will be destroyed if the couple ever decides to take him back. Therefore, it's crucial that they wait to imprint until they are certain. Later that night, Monica and Henry give David access to Martin's former bedroom. David wants to fit in and please his parents, but when he asks Monica to clothe him, she refuses because she becomes uneasy with the fact that he isn't really there. The following morning, David with sheer interest watches Monica make breakfast. No matter how hard Monica tries to ignore him, he keeps watching her while she completes her tasks for the remainder of the day. When Monica starts to lose her temper, she finally confides David in the closet. Later, feeling bad, Monica excuses herself by pretending that they are playing hide and seek and lets David go. As a result, David surprises Monica when she is using the restroom since he believes she is hiding there. David watches his parents eat supper and is so interested by it that he imitates Henry by pretending to drink from an empty glass and then eats spaghetti the same way Monica does. David laughs as Monica's lips become trapped with noodles, which causes his parents to join in. Later on in the evening, when it's time for David to go to bed, Monica finally takes care of him like a real son would. She cries as a result since this also makes her think about Martin in the hospital. The next morning, Monica makes the decision to start the imprinting treatment after realizing she needs David to handle Martin's circumstances. David softens and calls Monica, Mommy, for the first time after she finishes speaking the code that would make him fall in love. Because of this, Monica is already becoming closer to him, especially when he gives her a hug. One evening, Monica is excitedly preparing to join Henry at an event. Henry thinks that Monica is too attached to David despite the fact that he is a robot. Yet, Monica views David as a gift. David had used up all of Monica's pricey perfume, which the parents discover when he arrives to say goodbye. To make matters worse, David queries Monica about her eventual demise. Despite Monica's assurance that she gives David an old robotic bear named Teddy that was formerly Martin's because she doesn't want him to be alone while they are away. Later, David demonstrates to Monica how he can use himself as a speaker to transmit the sounds from her phone. Henry answers the phone, but Monica is unable to be heard due to David's speaker mode. Monica ultimately gets the phone from David after much reprimanding, and she gets some important news. A few days later, Martin returns home with Monica, having recovered from his suspended state, and been healed of his unique illness. Martin begins to use David like a toy as the days go by, urging him to smash things and asking him how he was created while poking his face. David sketches a picture of a bird with feathers poking out of its tail when asked to depict the first thing he can recall. Martin invites Monica to read Pinocchio to him and David one afternoon in an effort to tease David with the tale. David, though, finds the notion of a puppet becoming a real boy fascinating. Martin challenges David to an eating competition over lunch. Henry and Monica are terrified that David would be broken by the deed, but the boys ignore their advice and carry on eating. When David finally stops, everyone is startled by the drooping side of his face. David is then transported for repairs as Monica remains by his side. However, she freaks out when she hears him claim that it doesn't hurt. Martin is envious of his mother's concern for David, so when they get home, he lures David into surreptitiously cutting Monica's hair while she is dozing by claiming she would adore him for it. David first objects, but Martin tricks him into agreeing. David then takes a pair of scissors into the parents' bedroom to trim Monica's hair, but just then, Monica turns and nearly gets cut by the blades. When Monica cries, Henry awakens. He violently shakes David and demands to know why he did it until Monica stops him. Teddy finds some hair on the floor after it has fallen. Later, when they are preparing for Martin's birthday party, Monica defends David by stating that he is only a youngster making errors in response to Henry's attempt to persuade her that David is no longer worth the risk. David is taunted by Martin's pals at the party by having his artificial skin poked and his pain threshold tested with a knife. David's defense programming is triggered by this, forcing him to hide behind Martin because he is the only other person he feels secure with. Additionally, he starts to retreat, but he takes too far a step and unintentionally drags Martin to the bottom of the pool. David is left behind and is forced to watch from the pool as the adults rush to get Martin out of the water to do CPR. After this experience, Monica starts to be afraid of David, but she also discovers the lovely letters he has been writing to her, which makes her conflicted about how she feels about him. Finally, she comes to the conclusion that there is no other option and informs David that they will travel with Teddy. David is relieved since he believes he would be spending the day with his mother. The following day, Monica sobs as she heads to Cybertronics to eliminate David. Finally, the guilt becomes so oppressive that she alters her plans and takes the car into the woods, where David unknowingly lays out a picnic mat. He is abruptly stopped by Monica, who then informs him that she must permanently leave him. David, who is devastated, begs and apologizes for all he did. He also asks whether Pinocchio, a genuine kid, will be let back into the family. David begs Monica to give in, but she refuses. Before she leaves, she offers David some cash and warns him not to get caught by anybody, particularly Cybertronics. As a surprise to them both, Monica had to push David away as he clings on to her and won't let go. She then offers an apology before departing, allowing David to keep an eye on the automobile from a distance. In the meantime, Joe, a mecha from Rouge City, is giving his client emotional support as part of his duty to spend the night with her. After that, Joe walks across town in search of a hotel where he will meet his next customer. As an anti-robot organization called Flesh Fair searches the area for errant mechas, the owner asks Joe for his operating license badge. Joe then alters the color of his hair before entering his client's room. He sits on the bed and is horrified to see that it is covered in blood and that his client has passed away. A guy enters the room at that same time, admitting that he killed the wife. After realizing that he has been duped, Joe flees and hides in an alley, removing his operating license badge with a small blade so that he cannot be found. David explains to Teddy that he wants to locate the blue fairy from Pinocchio so she may transform him into a real boy while they are in the woods. Unexpectedly, a garbage truck pulls up to dump scrap materials, and a ton of broken-down mechas appear to rummage among the waste in an effort to fix themselves. Joe appears as well, and an airplane in the shape of a moon is pursuing him while David watches helplessly. It turns out to be the Flesh Fair group, and the mechas start fleeing in terror as they are pursued. To demonstrate its anti-robot stance, this organization kidnaps mechas and smashes them in a spectacle. They use a scan on their aircraft to track the mechas, but a group of them riding motorbikes also arrive in the forest and start pursuing the mechas through the trees until they finally approach a tiny village. However, David and Teddy manage to track a few mechas into an abandoned house where they encounter a nanny mecha who promises to look after him. These men shoot magnetic discs to trap the robots, and a few mechas are unhappily trapped. Unfortunately, the drivers continue to locate the cottage and destroy the wall to seize them all as the plane takes up Joe in a cage. Teddy collapses as David tries to grasp onto him during the battle. He instantly gets up and runs after the airplane since at least a few branches prevent him from breaking his fall. Teddy is later taken by staff members at the Flesh Fair event and placed in Lost and Found. The audience in the stadium celebrates as abandoned and outdated mechas continue to be fired out on fire and destroyed by cannons. Joe, who is startled by the touch, grabs Joe's hand while a scared David clings to him. Teddy, meantime, succeeds in scaling out of Lost and Found and discovers David imprisoned there. A little girl picking up Teddy at that time sees David and assumes he is a genuine guy. When the girl goes to see her father, one of the show's programmers, he is upset to learn that a boy is among the mechas. David discovers from the other mechas at the cage that the humans are destroying them in order to retain their superiority. The father of the girl then approaches David and checks to see whether he is a robot with a handheld X-ray. David's sophisticated system astounds and fascinates the father. However, the showrunner is not amused, and a fight develops as David observes the nanny robot being sprayed with acid as part of a game. The showrunner won't listen to the programmer's justifications on why David is important, and insists on having him appear on the show. The showrunner then drags David to the field and into the acid trap as Joe holds on to David's hand for protection. The showrunner yells about how the robotic child denigrates the populace while introducing David to the audience. The audience, however, becomes quiet as a result of their confusion at the presence of youngsters in the play and their unfamiliarity with it. David suddenly feels acid descend upon his shoulders, which causes him to scream and sob in terror. The audience believes David to be a real kid as a result, and they are so appalled that they turn on the showrunner and start throwing things at him. The girl's father then orders the guards to release David and Joe just in time for the riot to break out, allowing the two to escape unharmed. David was discovered to have been modeled after Hobby's late son in images of David as a child that are displayed at Hobby's office. A crew shows up to inform Hobby that David was seen at the Flesh Fair and to reassure him that the mecha is in good condition. Teddy and David are back in the woods when they unexpectedly glimpse the moon and assume it's an airplane from the Flesh Fair, which causes them to freeze. They take an alternate path just in case, and David tells Joe that he wants to find the Blue Fairy. They decide to travel to Rouge City together after Joe claims that it is where most ladies can be located. Joe locates a bunch of youths and manipulates them using a holographic pen by promising them plenty of mecha ladies in the future in order to get them a ride. When they arrive in the city, Joe offers David a tour and explains the city's flashing lights and oddly shaped structures. The lads then give them a ride. David tries to enter the chapel after being intrigued by an angel statue he believes to be the Blue Fairy, but Joe escorts him out. They eventually run upon Dr. Null, a computer program that acts as an all-knowing dictionary. David finds out that the Blue Fairy is at the end of the earth using the money Monica provided him. This knowledge comes from a comment by Hobby. Joe attempts to convey to David that people despise robots because he doesn't like it since he is aware that mechas that travel to the end of the planet never return. Joe claims that a human can never love a mecha, but David is adamant that Monica would love him if he is a real guy and yells at Joe for trying to imply otherwise. When they leave No's business, the police spot them and detain Joe because they still believe he killed the hotel guest. David jumps into the helicopter's driver's seat out of curiosity and turns it on, but it quickly becomes clear that he is unable to control it, and the pandemonium that results from his errant flying destroys property and almost kills people. As others flee in fear, Joe takes advantage of the diversion to elude the police and find David. Joe climbs into the chopper and takes the controls, maneuvering the craft skillfully and making a secure getaway. They arrive in the desolation that was once Manhattan. Joe calls it the place where lions weep. after a few hours. The difficulty with the increasing sea levels has left the last bits of the city in ruins and underwater. David comes across several statues of lions that are spewing water from their jaws, which makes him think of Joe's remark. They take this as a sign and land the chopper in the structure close to the lions, after which David and Joe start looking for Professor Hobby. After passing through a door with a fairy tale phrase on it, David discovers a chair with a person sitting on it. David is astonished to see a youngster who resembles him perfectly when it turns around. The second David merely grins and asks him to read along with him, claiming to be real, but the first David fears that the second David will take his position. A lamp is smashed into the table and the other David's head by an enraged David, showing that it is also a mecha. Joe flees in terror as David screams that he is exceptional and distinctive. Professor Hobby arrives to stop him at that precise moment, and tells David that he is a real kid by declaring that he is his own blue fairy. David was specifically directed to Professor Hobby by Dr. No's hints on where to find the blue fairy, and the adventure also tried David's resolve to see if it was strong enough to propel him toward an unattainable goal that other mechas can't. David considers the possibility that his path has been a part of someone else's plan as Hobby leaves the office to assemble his squad. After that, David goes into another chamber where he discovers a number of more mechas that resemble him, one of which is still open. When he gets close to a window, he recognizes the bird from his initial memory, which turns out to be a statue outside the workplace. As David and his female counterpart are mass-produced to be sold, many boxes are set out. As Joe watches from the chopper, David goes outside and jumps into the ocean after realizing he was never special. David is carried underwater by a school of fish until he encounters an object that piques his interest. Joe finds David before he can reach out, and uses the helicopter's extended arm to pull him away. When David emerges, he finds that he discovered the blue fairy underwater. Sadly, before they can go on, a police aircraft hovering over them attracts Joe unexpectedly. Joe bids David farewell and instructs him to tell the women his tale when he has grown into a manly young man. He switches on the submersible mode of the chopper and flies away. David and Teddy pilot the modified aircraft into a deserted fairground in their quest to discover the blue fairy. They observe all the fairyland-themed attractions until coming upon Pinocchio, who they then follow until they locate the blue fairy statue. They become trapped as the Ferris wheel falls on top of the chopper. David, however, is unconcerned and begs the blue fairy to transform him into a real boy. But the fairy doesn't answer, and the years go by with David still trapped there. Despite the lights starting to go out, he never gives up hope. The planet is covered in ice and snow 2,000 years later, and people have been gone for some time. An extraterrestrial spacecraft that is colonizing the world one day appears and circles Manhattan. They locate David and Teddy on the ice and bring David's chopper there. David begins to writhe when they swiftly revive him, and before he realizes the blue fairy is there in front of him. The alien beings observe him as he exits the chopper and approaches the frozen statue of the blue fairy, which he then touches, causing it to fracture and shatter in front of him. As the aliens scan David's memories to learn more about the planet, he finds himself unexpectedly seated at Monica's dining room table. David eagerly looks for Monica since the house is just how he remembers it, but instead, a new voice answers. David asks the blue fairy to transform him into a real boy after being shocked to see her alive and speaking, but she acknowledges she cannot. The blue fairy is used by the aliens to communicate with David, telling him that Monica is dead and that the fairy is unable to bring her back because her body has long since vanished. Teddy comes up to David while he is in mourning to remind him about the moment he cut Monica's hair, and to tell him that he still has the same lock of hair, which means the aliens may now resurrect his mother. Teddy tends to himself as David visits his former bedroom and thinks fondly of his pal Joe. They believe Monica is standing at the door at that very time, but it's actually an extraterrestrial who admits to being captivated by people. He wants to clone humans using biological traces in order to restore humanity, but so far all of his attempts have been unsuccessful because the clones only survive for one day. If they bring Monica back, this will also take place. David searches for Monica because he still has faith that she would be unique like him and endure forever, as he did while stranded in the chopper. When he discovers her in her bedroom, she is sobbing and he is removing her hair off her face. At that very time, Monica awakens and smiles warmly at David. David and Monica may now have some quality time together on this one day. David enjoys playing hide-and-seek with Monica, showing her his travel-inspired drawings, and sharing his birthday with her. David tucks Monica into bed as the outside lighting becomes dimmer out of concern that she won't wake up. David suddenly hears Monica say she loves him, and his expression is one of sadness and delight. Then, for the first time in his life, he chooses to sleep close to her, realizing his fantasies.